Good evening, morning, afternoon, night, whenever you find it most convenient to take a bowl of Skyline chili and then just chuck it into Kingdom Come to listen to the Bonfire. Join us as I, as always, am Alan, the poll with the goal, and that goal is to go to jury duty. I've been finally summoned to jury duty. I got it in the mail literally a few hours ago. As always, I am joined by my lovely jubbly co-hosts, DJ.
Jury duty. I've only ever been once, and a man found out that the judge was the woman that oversaw his divorce, where his wife burned down all of his things.
What an interesting case.
Welcome to Florida.
And as always, we're also joined by Tim.
Have fun at jury duty? You will not have fun. Nobody has fun at jury duty.
Yeah. But it is a civic duty nonetheless, I guess.
It is a civic duty, and people that do it, like, honestly, if you think about, like, the joke is that, like, the only people that are in jury duty are those that are too dumb to get out of it, and, like, that just isn't a good place for society. Like, people like, we need jurors.
That is true. To be judged by a jury of our peers, as is in the laws of the land. All right, but we're here not to talk about the laws of the land. We're here to talk about the Chicago Fire.
The laws of the fire.
And the laws of the fire. And actually, we're going to be talking about some laws, but just in a bit. The transfer window is open as of this podcast. And as of listening to this podcast, the special episode discussing the transfer window featuring Tim, Alec Talabrisi, as well as John from Hot Takes should be out. You guys might have already listened to it. If you haven't, go check it out. It's definitely a good one, right, Tim?
Yeah, I think that we did a decent job. A couple updates to that, which we'll talk about in a little bit. In a minute, we didn't know if those were happening at the time that we recorded, but I think it still does a good job of, like, laying the land of, like, where the fire are, where maybe they will be at the end of this window.
True. And of course, a lot of people have their opinions on what the fire should or should not do. Now, MLS writer Matt Doyle said that the fire should do nothing this transfer window, and he specifically goes out to call out the front office, saying, how many swings are you going to give this front office? They got so many chances to build a functional, successful roster, and they haven't managed it, and are basically saying we should do nothing this summer window. Do y'all agree with him?
I mean, I see where he's coming from. However, I will say I agree as long as it's long term. If you're just signing a guy on loan, or like doing what they did with Yoda Mostisian a few years ago, where it's like, we're just signing this guy literally so we have depth on the roster, then it's fine.
I mean, my take was kind of, look, I think if you want to fairly judge someone, like, if they've changed, I think that, like, I talked about this a little bit before, but you have to imagine if Georg Heitz had been fired at the end of last season and a new sporting director came in and had exactly the same sort of, like, off-season, like, winter transfer window that the Fire had, would you think that they were doing a good job or a bad job? And I think that you'd have to say that, like, if you look at the moves that were made, like, bringing in Kellen Acosta, bringing in Andrew Gutman, bringing in, Toby Salquez, Alan Aragoni, like the Chase Gasper move. Like, I know we haven't seen him a lot, and people have, variable thoughts about his quality, but, like, he was at one point considered, like, a high-end MLS prospect, like, very high-end, like supposed to slot in to be one of the best players at his position in the league. His career hit a bump, and the Fire got him cheap enough to be on the reserve roster. So, like, to me, that is a good move. Like, I didn't even mention Hugo Kuipers, which obviously is, like, the biggest move in team history. And then also moving players on, like getting Kasper Shabilko out, like the Jairo Torres move was something that was, like, long overdue. And I think, good for both sides, but it was just a miracle that they were able to get him out without using a buyout. So abstractly, I think that was a good offseason. I think that, for my opinion, about Heitz and his performance overall to really change, I would need to see more of that. So I'd like to see more of it. One thing we haven't seen from Heitz is moves in the summer. And we know, like, some of the, like, better known GMs around the league wait until the summer, even kind of, like, intentionally gimping their squad to make moves in the summer so that because that is when players in Europe and South America are most available. And so like, Garth Lagerwey in Atlanta has traded away several key pieces of that team and was not able to replace them until today, Thursday, as we're recording. And I mean, they haven't announced like replacements for everyone yet, but like for all the players they lost, but they're prepared to spend $50 million this one window. We haven't seen big moves from Heights. I want to see big moves from Heights. So I want to either see moves on the same scale that we saw in the offseason, which is tricky to do because of things that were entirely in his control. The roster is completely full. Like there are no available roster spaces for the Flyers. So every body in has to be matched with a body out. But that's the job. I mean, all of these contracts are now ones that were like he signed his name on the dotted line. Metaphorically, because I'm pretty sure it's all digital now, but whatever. And so this is like a situation he painted himself into, and I think that we have to see if we can get out of it. But if it's not going to be a big offseason, if it's not going to be bringing in another piece of like the same profile and impact, I'm not saying the same amount of money, but like the same impact that Hugo Kuipers has had. And realistically, like 2 or 3 other big moves around that. I mean, at that, like, then it's sort of like, look, the Fire have obvious needs around the roster build. And if he's not going to be in a hurry to fill them at the time when the best players in the world are available, then, like that to me is more than anything the sign that he's not able to perform his job at the level that the team needs him to.
One thing I also feel like needs to be added is the big question when it comes to the offseason and to long term is what is Klopas' future? What is the odds of Klopas returning as a head coach when these guys are with these guys' contracts? And it's also worth remembering that a lot of players are going to be out of contract this year. I think at least 6 of them are senior roster players. So it's kind of one of those cases of I would like to see them get someone like some of the big names. Like there are certain guys that if they say, hey, I'm willing to come, but I want to sign a 3-year contract, you sign that 3-year contract. End of story. But the question for me is Klopas. It's what are we going to do with the offseason? Are you going to see any guys actually leave this year? Because the big question is Shaqiri. And of course, you have Jimenez, but Jimenez probably isn't going anywhere until it's off season, if then.
Yeah, I think for the roster rule changes, which do we want to get into those yet, Alan, or do you want to save that for a minute?
Oh, I mean, we can save that for a minute because there's just like one little bit of piece of news that we can say right beforehand.
Let's get to the news, and then because I think that ties into the Shaqiri discussion pretty directly. So let's save the Shaqiri talk for that.
Yes, and just a little piece of news that literally also dropped today is involved with the new training center that's being built on the west side of the city. They officially announced the naming rights and that the new training facility will be named Endeavor Health Performance Center for Endeavor Health, who are I'm pretty sure like they're everything that has to do with physical and medical for the team. They help out with that. So they're going to have the name rights for it. And they also announced that January 2025 is when the training facility, the performance center, is going to be opened. They put out a video with all these renderings of like the training room, like the film room. They said that every team, like from the first team to the academies, are going to have their own lockers and all just fun stuff like that. So, I mean that training facilities can also impact who can come in through the door. Because, I mean, how many players do you think might have been like, oh, Chicago, and then they see Mount Bridgeview and they're like, I don't
know. We will not have majestic Mount Bridgeview slander on that scale on any pod that I'm on, Alan. Come on.
I apologize.
But the point's well taken. Yeah.
Yes.
Like I almost told Hannah to go climb Mount Bridgeview when we went up there to watch the Open Cup game.
It is probably taller than any peak in Florida.
I've done the Mount Bridgeview climb a few times.
But realistically, though, like just having the renderings and saying like this isn't something that we're talking about building at some point. Being able to take a prospective player when they come to visit, if they come to visit beforehand, as a lot of them do, because you don't want to commit to spend 3 years of your life somewhere you've never been. Just showing them like here's the progress, like giving them a walkthrough of like here's what we're building, and then showing them pictures of like here's what it is. It just says a lot about the scale and ambition that this team is operating under, in a very different way than like, here we are in a 20-year-old stadium 5 miles southwest of the southernmost corner of the southwest corner of the city. And here's a weight room with no windows and like cinder block walls,
And good luck getting here on Harlem traffic. Beep beep.
Yep.
So yeah. Now I think we can get to, as we jokingly said, the laws of the land, and the land being MLS roster rules. We were literally complaining about, or I at least was complaining about it last episode, that the league, as of today, date of recording, has announced changes. Basically, three changes essentially. One, the first one being that clubs are able to have what they're calling 6 prime roster spots. The prime roster spots referring to designated players as well as U22 initiative players. And they basically did away with the rule that like you had to have a certain player in order to have all of the U22 initiative slots. Now it can be, you can have just any the specific number, and the specific number depends on a specific path that a club can choose. Basically, a club can either have 3 designated players and 3 U22 initiative players, or they can have only 2 designated players, 4 U22 initiative players, and up to $2 million in GAM funny money. So I'm guessing this is a way the league is trying to incentivize clubs to get more younger, talented players rather than just trying to get more, I guess, veteran stars to sell shirts or something like that.
Honestly, it allows, for a long time, MLS roster rules, basically, you had options about whether or not you wanted to spend. Like, and we saw that with teams like the Philadelphia Union that weren't big spenders, and contrast that with like Atlanta, who were. But the roster rules more or less made it so that if you wanted to be field a really strong team, there was kind of one way that the roster rules sort of put you in the way of doing it. And like, you could choose about like whether you wanted to get a DP that was in their like mid-20s in their prime, or like older than that, maybe like on the sort of like wrong side of 30, so to speak. But there was basically one template that MLS was like, look, if you want to be ambitious and spend, here's what the formula is going to look like for you. And now there's 2 templates, which is kind of cool to see.
Wow.
And the Fire have made extensive use of both the U22 initiative slots as well as, designated player slots over the past few years. Alex Calabrese and I have a story on red97.com that details the roster rule changes, breaks them down. We also kind of get into what it means for the Fire. Now, unfortunately, one of the roster rule changes that had been reported previously by Paul Tenorio at The Athletic and others was a second buyout, which would have been critical for the Fire because they did use their one buyout when they transferred Kasper Shibielko to FC Lugano, because it's considered a related party transaction by MLS. Unfortunately, that second buyout didn't happen. The players union objected. There's some good reasons why I can say they wouldn't want a second buyout. And part of it is like, I really kind of think that the Players Association sort of feels like they renegotiated the CBA during COVID. I think that they feel like they gave away a lot and didn't get a lot in return. So I think to some extent when owners are like, hey, so we're going to make changes to the CBA. I think the Players Association very rightfully is like, oh, you want to make changes to the CBA? Great. Here's a list of changes we want to see. Let's look at your changes and we'll just like do them all, right? Which obviously wasn't happening.
Nope. Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And then the one last kind of little change to the roster rule was basically how much money clubs can convert from individual player transfers. Previously, it was like a really arbitrary, around $1.2 million can be converted to GAM. Now it's up to $3 million from individual player transfers.
Yeah, it's not actually an arbitrary money. It's a percentage of the salary cap that year. Like, so it ends up looking like a very arbitrary amount, but it's a percentage of the salary cap that was negotiated. But
it just looks arbitrary on paper. Like,
yeah, and now it's a flat $3 million, and that's $3 million overall per team per year, which is kind of a big change because before, like, when the Fire sold Gaga Slonina to Chelsea for like $8 million plus incentives, putting it more like the $10 million range, that could have been like they could only take 1.2 million. It was like 1.1 at the time, but like doesn't really matter. Of that to add to the salary cap. But the thing is, if the Fire had sold 3 other players for 1.1 million, each one of those would have added to the salary cap. And eventually you could have like unlimited amounts of allocation money in theory if you kept on buying players and flipping them. Now there's a flat $3 million that you can use, which what that helps is teams that make one big blockbuster move out per year. And it kind of hurts teams that are like selling younger, sort of like less proven players for less money because now they like essentially before they could like add that all up, and if it add up to more than $3 million, which it probably never did for any one team, but like in theory, if they did, it could have been unlimited GAM. Now there's a hard limit on it.
MLS roster rules, they're so much fun.
We try to break it down as simply as possible. I think the big question is like, what does it mean for the Fire? And right now, as it stands, unfortunately, because that second buyout didn't go through, the Fire's roster is completely full. All senior roster spots are occupied, as are all supplemental roster spots. So any player that comes in has to be matched with the player that goes out. And we talked about Shaqiri before. The big question is Shaqiri going to be a Chicago Fire basically for the rest of the year? There's 9 games left in the regular MLS regular season. There's Leagues Cup. And I think that the team had been willing to use the buyout. Now that it doesn't exist, they're in a position where they can say, all right, Shaqiri, like, we can't buy you out. They owe a little bit more than $2 million left on his contract. And so they can say, look, if you want to go to another club somewhere, we won't stand in your way. We're not going to charge a transfer fee. We'll let you go, but we can't pay you anything out of the contract we owed. It's either got to be a mutual termination, which just means everyone shakes hands and walks away, or it's got to be it would be probably a free transfer, but like a transfer to a different club, at which point he would sign a new contract with that club and he would get paid whatever he agrees to get paid at that club. The $2 million the Fire owe under the current deal would just go away, basically. And so it's kind of up to Shaqiri, and like it's up to the Fire a little bit too, if they think that he's a useful part of the roster still, if they think he can contribute, if they think he'd be incentivized to contribute towards the end of his deal, or if they wanted to play hardball with him and say like, look, you can come back to Chicago if you want, but we're not going to say that you're ever going to see a pitch again while you're here.
Yeah.
Which realistically is probably the most likely option is the last one.
Sort of like what happened to Jairo Torres.
Yeah, and I think the question is, if you're playing hardball like that with him, does he think that maybe right now after Euros where he had limited minutes but a good tournament, does he think that like maybe he's got like a little bit more of a boost? And are there teams that would want him now when it's the off season in Europe that maybe wouldn't be as interested in the winter? I mean, who knows? Like that's really kind of like I said, up to him and his agent. He's in the last 6 months of his contract now, so he and his agent are allowed to speak to whoever they want without the Fire's permission. Either about a deal that would start in January, but like realistically, if they came and said, look, we'll take you now on a free, I think the Fire wouldn't stand in the way.
Yeah. All right. I think we're ready to move on to the game that happened for us last night, for y'all a bit ago. So to go from losing to the team in last place, to playing a very boring game to someone who's like mid table in the playoff spot, to beating the team that was leading the supporter shield. We beat them to the point they are no longer leading the supporter shield. Welcome to
Away from home.
Away from home. Welcome to the Chicago Fire. Fire win 1-0 at TQL. I guess the Fire just have something good going on over in Cincinnati, considering they've had a few good results over at TQL now. And I guess it's 3 points. Well, I mean, not guess. We got them 3 points. So the Fire move up to 13th now in the table. So we're edging forward ever so slightly more. Frank Klopas kept making comments saying that he wants to be above the playoff line by League's Cup. And I guess we're ever so slightly to that happening.
It is possible for it to happen. And like, we can talk about this now or in the preview, but the Fire need help to be in the 9th place by the League's Cup break, but they can get there. They need to win against Inter Miami, which is obviously not an easy thing to do. And then I believe that the only other things that need to happen is Columbus needs to beat Atlanta, which like doesn't seem crazy. Beat or draw Atlanta, and Philadelphia needs a result against Nashville, either a draw or a win. So if those 3 things happen, then the Fire go to bed on Saturday night in a postseason spot going to League's Cup.
Which would be a bit of a confidence booster, definitely. So Cincinnati, the first half was low key a bit boring. Now it was still definitely more entertaining than what we saw against NYCFC at Soldier Field. I mean, Tim, you mentioned there are 0-0 games that are incredibly boring like that game, and there's also 0-0 games that are a lot of fun. And low key, prior to the goal that happened that we'll discuss in a bit, it definitely was on the fun side. I mean, it did start slow. The Fire were being careful with their possession, and then near the end of the first half, it was sort of Cincinnati being careful with their possession. So, it was a little back to back, but still slow. Now that second half, though, was when both teams just exploded out of the break. And there were a few mistakes on both sides that were capitalized. Now, the mistake from Cincinnati being a header that just went right to Hugo Kuipers, who ran forward. Guti in the middle, easy pass, straight bottom of the net to make it 1-0 for the Fire. And
I don't think that pass was easy. I think that pass had to be perfectly weighted.
Well, I mean, easy easy in terms of how you look at it. I mean, from a perspective's kind of view, sort of from a FIFA, I guess if you're playing FIFA, it's an easy.
I think if you're playing
tap.
FIFA, that's an easy pass. I think if you're playing soccer, that's not a great pass.
Of course.
I mean,
Hugo, I apologize in saying that your assist was easy, but what definitely wasn't his selflessness in just giving the pass, because that was sort of one of the, I don't want to say lowlights, but like, I guess little minuses when it came to the game, is that a lot of players were selfish when it came to shots onto the goal. Instead of making maybe one more additional pass to a player that was open, they decided to take the shot themselves. I noticed that a lot, especially from Marin Haile Selassie. I've noticed Koutsias was doing that when he was subbed in, as well as the wing back players of like Aragoni. And I think Suke also had a few shots themselves that just went up into space, essentially. But
I think that going direct, though, against the team and trying to shoot more, like the team has needed to shoot more for a while. So like I would take that versus the opposite. And the other thing that does is it helps unsettle defenses on the other side, because you think like this is a team that is going to keep on shooting. And so I have to mark this guy, even if it's a low, like not a great angle from distance, right? Because like you're like, they're going to shoot.
True.
So Kate nearly even got a goal if Salentano doesn't get in the way.
That is true. Like in like the 9th minute, Suke had like a really nice shot on goal. And of course, I mentioned that there was a mistake on the other end where Cincinnati could have scored, but Chris Catch These Hands Brady had an incredible stellar performance that earned himself a spot on the MLS team of the match day starting 11. It's his 12th career clean sheet, fourth shutout of the season, and he had a career high 9 saves in the game, which is, fun fact, second most saves in a game against FC Cincinnati, only behind Bobby Shuttleworth. I only mention that because of Bobby Shuttleworth. And he just had a really, really great game. Like the saves weren't just like, of course, I don't want to say easy because it is hard to be a goalkeeper, but that looked more standard than usual. But like he made some Superman saves against Cincinnati and a lot of critical saves that kept the Fire that clean sheet. So, I mean, round of applause to Chris Brady, and also round of applause to the defense, as there were 20 tackles, 8 blocks, 34 clearances. The defensive line was working overtime, and of course, as always, I will give a special shout out to the sheriff Wyatt Omsberg, who's been doing really well in the middle of that back three.
The defense last night played as well as it probably has all year, and it needed to. Not to mention all of the times, like I believe it was Gaston Jimenez that pretty much turned into Scott Sterling for a minute. It took a ball directly to the face. But the defense last night, it was great. Brady goated as always, and we now have the gas man instead of the milkman, apparently. But Brady definitely deserved man of the match. He was awesome. Defense did well. I don't think anybody actually had a bad game last night. I mean, Dean had bad offense, but defensively he was good. Like, I think everyone was just really good last night.
Yeah, I think Dean was okay. I think that Chris Mueller, who was subbed off in the 59th minute, I thought it wasn't his best performance, and it's a little troubling because I feel like that's starting to be a trend, and like that happens with players, right? Like you go through phases of like doing better and worse, but he really hasn't had that much time, playing since the return from his injury, and I think the question is like, I mean, clearly, right? Like it's been over a year, but the question becomes like, are you going to get a good Chris Mueller back, even if it's not quote, and like it's never going to be the same Chris Mueller. Other thing worth shouting out, I guess, going back to plaudits for the defense though. Toby Salquist made his first appearance since April 27th against Atlanta when he was injured in what looked like it could very well be a season-ending injury. So
go ahead. There are time like rewatching that. I watched that a while back, and it's like that's one of those ones where it's could very well look season-ending. It almost looked career-ending if it was bad enough, but thankfully.
It's kind of funny because I was talking to some like after the like nobody asked about it in the press conference just because like we assumed it was a season-ending injury. Like it didn't even like it normally like I mean you don't normally get good information, but you might get like like he was stretchered out the field, but he's walking around and he's doing okay. We're going to evaluate it tomorrow. Blah blah blah. Like none of that. Like it was like we just assumed he was done for the year, and so it's great seeing him back.
Amen. I say to that. Good to see him back on the defense.
The other thing that I think is worth shouting out, I keep on flipping sides of the pitch here, but Brian Gutierrez not in the starting 11.
That is true. He came on and he was the super sub of the game.
Yeah. So we asked Frank Klopas about it after the game. He said that he thought that Guti has been getting, this is a direct quote, has logged a lot of minutes and it's about him getting sharp and finding ways where 3 games in a week where he can freshen up a bit. And since we can't continue playing him all the time, because I think mentally and physically both, that I could see that he wasn't as sharp. He was trying. I mean, even in the last game, we got a good opportunities in the final third, and it's just decision-making and sometimes mental fatigueness.
I mean, we did mention in the NYCFC game that was not Brian's best game. So some player rotation, essentially.
Yeah, and I can't remember who said this. Like somebody around the league like called that out as a great performance of him doing a really good job. And I was like, I don't know what game you were watching, but like it just seemed like a really kind of like weaker performance than we've seen from Goody. and what we expect from him. So it was good to see him back. Like maybe it is again, like it's kind of refreshing to see Frank Klopas taking a player as important as Brady is, because every time he's subbed on when it's at Soldier Field, like the crowd goes wild about it. Like he's a popular guy in the pitch, and it's good to see that like if Klopas thinks that he needs to be out of the 11 for one reason or another, that he's willing to do that, because I think that we've seen that like Gucci can respond, like he can respond in a positive way to that kind of feedback.
Yes, sir. The game was heated at times. The Fire were very much on the offensive. They had, I think, 17 fouls for the entire game, and I remember Apple TV, they showed the statistics that at one point the Fabian Herbers had like 4 fouls on him, and then like there were a few other players that had fouls, and then Cincinnati in its entirety only had 2. Herbers he was booked in the first half. There was another challenge where he could have possibly been sent off. He wasn't. Kuipers and Kutsias were also booked for fouls. So the Fire were very much a bit heated this game.
That foul that you're talking about that wasn't a second yellow. I mean, like, let's be honest. If he wasn't on a yellow, like, do we all think that was a card?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's like one of those things where, like, there's nothing in the laws of the game that say that, like, a second yellow is any different than the first one, but it's, like, the thing that referees do. And, like, to me, that's a yellow all day. Like,
Yeah. Exactly. So, Frank Klopas definitely noticed that, and that's why Kellen Acosta, the better Acosta, since the other Acosta did not feature, was put on to, I guess, avoid.
He was definitely the best Acosta on the pitch that night. That's for sure.
That is true. And Tim, when we were doing predictions last game, you mentioned that Acosta wasn't going to be there, plus a few other players. And that was like the big thing that the Apple TV commentators kept repeating, the fact that Lucho Acosta was not there. And they showed a statistic that I think it was like since Cincinnati have picked up Acosta, and he has not featured in a game, they are 0 for 6 for 4, I think was the statistic. I'm pretty sure like around 10, 11 games. But regardless, winless in all games when Lucho Acosta is not present. And I was like, oh, do we have a chance? And that exactly is what happened. And now I think, of course, there probably has been a bit more to that. Like we mentioned, there were other absences from the Cincinnati squad. But, I mean, hey.
Yeah, so 0-5-4 going into the match, 0-6-4 by MLS standards, because they put losses before draws, like barbarians. Now 0-6-4, so still winless. Negative 17 goal differential in matches when he's not in the lineup.
How many goals have they scored?
Lucho Acosta in general, or like this season, or
what when they don't have Acosta, I mean.
Oh, it's a negative 16 goal differential. Now negative 17 in the 11 matches that he's not there.
I mean, how many goals have they scored?
Oh,
does it say? Do you know? Or
I don't know off the top of my head. I looked up the number, but I don't know.
Yeah, but still, like, I mean, that kind of says a lot, because Acosta's, not really like that. That is a really bad thing.
Well, going back to the transfer talk just for a second, like Lucho Acosta is the kind of MLS player that, like, really, like, if you have him, he instantly raises the level of the team. Like, he was on DC United for what, like 4 or 5 years, and looked good. I don't think he looked as good as he has in Cincinnati, but like, clearly a number 10 that could perform at an MLS level. FC Cincinnati brings him in. He raises his level again. Like, this is like really just when he got to be good. He had, like, I think like a 1-year stint in Mexico in 2020, and it didn't really click for either party. So he came back to MLS, to Cincinnati, and I mean, 17 assists this guy's got this year. Like, it's wild. Like, sure. Think about the Fire players that could have been scoring the goals on 17 assists. And like, yeah, it's bad when a team can't win without a guy in the lineup. But the other side of it is like that is literally the definition of a game-changing player. And when you say that you need more game-changing players, like that is what that means. Like that's how it looks. Like he raises the level of everyone around him.
Sir, yes, sir. And as we mentioned previously, it was getting heated from both the Fire in terms of their offensive. It was also getting heated from Cincinnati near the end to the point where the head coach Pat Noonan received a yellow card for I guess stepping on the pitch and yelling. He received a yellow card, and then he did so again. And it was just funny as he just stepped up like in face to the referee. The ref was like, "Yup," and then just showed him the red card as the discussion gets thrown on. I'm pretty sure he also threw out some words that you can't say on this podcast.
It's the
Italy.
Oh
no, not
yeah.
not
You
that
didn't need
word.
to be great at lip reading to get some of those words. Let me put it that way.
Exactly. Even my dad was like, "Oh, you can see what he's saying."
Yep.
And then, of course, there was also another red card, also near the end of the game. Alvis Powell, who just while Cincinnati were on the attack and the Fire were pushing back, he literally pushed Brian Gutierrez and then further pushed. I think it was Arnold Suke into the advertising boards. The referee already went over to give him a yellow card warning for that, in which he immediately started to argue, which included a push of hands. He threw hands at Omsberg, ran from the referee, to which, of course, the referee then came up to, throw him out of the game, give him the red card. The MLS, the Apple TV broadcasters were weirdly blaming Kellen Acosta for it. They were saying that he was instigating him for some reason, which it was like, if he's running from the ref from that point, he's not instigating. He's like letting him know that, I mean, the die has been cast from the moment he pushed Wyatt Omsberg and started running from the ref. So like, I don't know why they were throwing Kellen into there as well.
I mean, Kellen Acosta does get in players' faces and he's willing to get under their skin. And like I'm not blaming him for it. We all watch Copa America. Like that's part of the game. And like, if you have that club in your bag, you should use it. And if you don't have that club in your bag, like you are going to lose some games you could win because like you can't, like there's a part of the game that you can't play. And I think the Fire have lacked a player who can do that effectively for a long time. Like Miguel Navarro would kind of try doing that, but he would also then just like, well, one, like the height, and two, just like he much like coaches in recent Fire games, doesn't seem to know where the line is and just steps over it. So, and Acosta's very good about straddling that line. And like, man, like I've thought so often about his ability to do that and just the fate of the USMNT, in Copa America, where it seemed like there was nobody willing to play the dark arts, like willing or able to play the dark arts whatsoever. And like, man, like I know like on the pitch talent, the roster that the United States sent to Copa America is like, I don't know who you take off to put Acosta on in terms of like pure skill, but in terms of veteran ability and ability to do stuff like that is something that would have improved that roster.
Yeah.
But yeah, the referee, by the way, Philip Dujic, he is like rapidly becoming the internet's like MLS's most like meme worthy referee. Yeah. He's the guy that made the rounds for like the match between St. Louis and Atlanta in St. Louis, where
however,
he's like announcing the VAR decision to the crowd and he like raises in his hand. It's like, wait, no, however, because the crowd is going wild. Yeah. Like, no, you're not going to like this, guys. So him doing the like getting yelled at by Pat Noonan, like, and he's just like nodding, like, yeah, and then casually writing the card. It's like, here you go, buddy. Like,
nah, that was good. No, that was that was funny. But then
100%, like he's the meme MLS referee that we didn't know that we needed until we had him.
Amen. I say to that. This overall just was a really good game. Honestly, from both sides, this just was a really entertaining game to watch. I'm pretty sure for everyone, even before and after the goals. And of course, this is good for Fire fans because we won on the road. So this is, I think, what the second away win that we have this season.
Yep, that in Toronto.
That in Toronto. All right. So,
but yeah, it's phenomenal. Like the the one thing that makes it a little bit is that of the 6 losses that Cincinnati have, 5 are actually at home. So who knows?
Interesting.
They may actually be eating the chili.
It's possible, honestly. So the Fire are staying. DJ, you had something to say?
No, I'm not going to give the podcast in trouble for saying that.
Okay.
About the soup.
Okay, we'll stay away from the stoop.
The Alan Gordon soup story. All right, everyone, just pretend that we made a joke about that. And if you don't know what we're talking about, just DM the Minerva 97 Pods account on X, which if you're not following, you should.
Yes, follow.
If you ask us about it, I will respond with a picture of a cilantro.
All right.
Okay.
As we stay away from that, the Fire are staying on the road to the now newest Supporter Shield leaders, Inter Miami, on Saturday, 6:30 p.m. Central, which is the last MLS game before the Leagues Cup starts. It's funny how we go to one team who leads the Supporter Shield, we beat them, and now we go to the next team that is now leading the Supporter Shield, both on the road. So, of course, their record is 15 wins, 5 draws, 4 losses for 50 points with a plus 14 goal differential. Pretty good. Though the previous meeting against Miami, of course, we have to go all the way back to April of last year.
October. In Miami, you mean?
Well, I was going to the last time we met Miami.
Last October.
Yeah.
Yes, that is true.
The 4-1.
Yes, I apologize. I have my dates written wrong. Yes, to when
you're confused about European and American dates, aren't you, Alan? You could admit it.
I am. It happens.
He thought it was April 10th when it's October 4th.
October 4th. Christ on a bicycle. All right. You see, and I could have just done October 4th. Every episode, this happens at least once. Last time it was with the times. This time it's with the dates.
I always try to put the actual That's why I write months in the rundown, because I'm I don't know which way Alan's brain is going with this, and I don't want to guess.
Well, you see, it's the rundown wherever I got my info. October 4th of 2023, when the Fire faced off against Miami in front of a sold-out Soldier Field crowd that didn't feature Messi. 4-1 for the Fire. Now, that was probably the game where Shaqiri proved ever so slightly that he can play to his fullest potential for the Fire. And then, previous to that, I'm pretty sure, unless I have my dates wrong, was all the way in March of last year when the Fire played in Inter Miami that featured a 3-2 Fire win. So the last time the Fire have played both away and at home against Miami, they've been victorious. Both of them were without Messi, and this one also looks to be without Messi as he is still out from Copa America. Though that doesn't mean Miami will be without their stars, as Luis Suarez and Sergio Busquets are going to be there. Busquets is back in after their last game, which was a 3-1 win against Toronto. And Busquets is in after serving a 1-game suspension. And their striker, Campagna, will be out for the Olympics. But, with Suarez, they'll probably have someone to put that in. So,
yeah. It's it really is it is a very deep roster. I know that there's jokes about how do they get there under MLS roster rules and stuff like that. And they did it partly because Luis Suarez apparently is willing to take a massive pay cut to play with Messi again, which Messi can talk guys into in a way that I don't know, you can insert your recent Chicago Fire DP name and Robert Barrett wasn't going to be able to do for anybody. But they have been able to attract a lot of really good talent. They have a strong academy that's been bringing people in. So, you know, it's a deep roster and it's a good roster. It's not without flaws because like it's an MLS roster at the end of the day, and like you can't spend money everywhere, but like they're a very good team. One shout out, like Julian Gressel, who is the former podcasting partner of Fabian Herbers on Z Soccer Pod. And now he's got his own podcast. He has really been the like unspoken hero of that roster. He has just made a lot of stuff click, you know. He's only got one goal in the season, but he's like the pass behind the pass guy, like really setting things up offensively in the midfield. Like his numbers in terms of like ball carrying, stuff like that. Like he is an elite midfielder in this league. I think that he's one of the guys that Tata Martino, the coach, brought in. Tata Martino like trusted him basically straight out of college because like Fabian Herbers, he's a German that went to college in the United States. Trusted him like to just threw him into that like really strong Atlanta United team that Martino coached, and he just did well then, and like that kind of like launched his MLS career and stardom. And he's still humming for him. So.
Sir, yes, sir. What college did you go to again? Out of, if you remember off the top of your head?
Oh, it was a weird one. It's not like not one of the ones that you think about because like it wasn't like, you know, like so like Fabian Herbers went to Creighton, like they've got a really strong soccer program. Maybe did he go to college? He did.
I'm sorry if I threw you under the bus.
No, he did. I'm trying to remember where it was. It's someplace that I didn't remember. I'm actually going to look this up. All right. Providence Friars.
Ah, Providence.
Providence College. He's a Providence Friar, which if you haven't thought about the Providence Friars in a very long time or ever, you are not alone.
Versus like Fabian Providence was a thing.
Yeah. Versus Fabian Herbers like went to Creighton, which is
they're
like,
both in the Big East, so same conference.
Yeah, but Creighton is a team that you think about like making noise in like NCAA soccer. I don't think the Providence Friars really are. You know what I mean? Like Creighton is up there as sort of like maybe not like quite at the level like, you know, your Indiana, Syracuse, like schools like that, which ironically are schools that associated with other people from Minerva 97. But
yeah, that's true. And then there's also DePaul, that's also in the Big East, but is known for none of its sports at the moment, unless it is being a laughingstock at said sport. I digress.
Good all shuffleboard team. I don't know. That's not actually an NCAA sport.
If anything, softball I think is decent. I have no clue. So yeah. Do we have any predictions or thoughts going into this game? Can the Fire pull 3 more points away and truly be either really close or above to the playoff spot before Leagues Cup starts? Question mark.
So there's this rule, Beverage's law of headlines, that any headline that ends in a question mark can be answered in one word. No.
All right. All right. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Thank you, Tim.
I mean, to be honest, this is one of those games where you can tell it's either going to be like an amazing, good game for the Fire or RSL. There's not going to be an in-between.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that the record is close between FC Cincinnati and Inter Miami, but like Miami, they've maintained that record while missing out on Lionel Messi for an extended period of time, missing out on Luis Suarez for an extended period of time. Like, oh man, like I like it's like I said, it's a deep.
Miami
is
a also better roster. At home,
much better at home. I don't know what is going on with FC Cincinnati at home this season. Like, they've lost as many games at home in 2024 as they did everywhere in 2023, and there's still 9 games left to be played for them. So, but Inter Miami doesn't seem to have that problem. Like, at the beginning of the year, I never would have guessed that they would have this many points. Like,
We all expected them to just crash and burn at some point.
Yeah, I think that everyone expected they'd make the playoffs, right? Like, I think that everyone thought this is going to be like a good tournament team. Like, they are going to feast and famine, and the feast is going to be when basically things like Copa America weren't happening, right? Like, so it's like they're there, and like Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez like are there and contributing, and then they'll like scrape together some results, but like, like, is Sergio Busquets really going to be the guy that's winning all those games? Probably not. Then who does it? No, like that's not really the roster. Like they've got it. Like they have a good MLS roster that they then have Suarez and Messi on top of, like, which is wild.
True.
It's like it's almost like a cheat code, like,
All right. Do we have any predictions then for the cheat coded Inter Miami? Could we pull another away? Can we pull up with another away victory of some sorts?
So I actually just asked Matt Shibman, our CEO founder, for his score prediction, and he said 3-1. Obviously, I don't know which way that is. I'm assuming Fire because it's Matt.
Well, he is Mr. Optimist of the pod when he was here. R.I.P. I would like to go the optimist route as well and say that it could be another 1-0 for the Fire. I think defense could still hold up in a manner that they did. Chris Brady is the GOAT, so why not have another GOAT performance? And I think up forward, especially between Hugo Kuipers, Brian Gutierrez, all the forward players, including Marin Halleck Selassie, I think it could still happen.
I'm gonna say Luis Suarez is gonna get a red card. I don't know why, but I feel like Suarez 100% is going to get a red card this game. Okay. And it's going to be for something involving Brady.
All right, that would be hilarious. So, honestly, I don't know. Like, some part of me is just like, this is going to end up being like a weird, like, 3-3 draw or something like that, which on one hand is like the Fire offense wakes up. On the other hand, it's like they need 3 points and they don't get them. And it just, seems like it falls short. But
there's also the fact. Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
Good.
No, go for it.
There's also the fact that this is right before like All-Star Game, League's Cup, so it's like I don't know how much Inter Miami is going to be like the end of this game.
That's possible too. The other side of it is like for the Fire, like there's a lot of guys that could probably use a break, like 3 games in a week. Alan Aragoni has been going since the start of the European season in 2023. So like he has had,
wow.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's had
be busy.
Yeah. He's had over a year without a break. So who knows? It's really hard to predict a Fire win for this one. And it's really easy to predict a Miami win. But that's why kind of like Ross seems like, but that just is me sitting on the fence. Cause like, you're right, DJ, like there is a realistic way that this could be sort of what it was for FC Cincinnati, where it's a trap game against them. Right. Like the Fire, I think are better than the Revs were when they lost to the Revs. I think that they are like better than the Earthquakes were when they lost to the Earthquakes, and yet they lost those games. And like, maybe the Fire is going to be a team that ends up being able to win games against teams in the Supporter Shield rankings or like competition, and not games at those spoon rankings, because that's the way the season seems to be going.
All right. I want to be a Matt level of optimist and still say 1-0 victory. Very similar sort of trap game to Cincinnati. I feel like we could just keep the good times running. I just feel like we also just need that boost of positivity and optimism.
That would be awesome.
Legitimately, like that scenario that I laid out, where it's just it's one Like, the Fire need two things to go their way, one of which is Columbus getting a win or a draw, which just seems like almost money in the bag, which makes you almost suspicious of it. And then Philly, like, again, like, I think Philly are better than the record if they get a draw or win against Nashville, which Nashville are not great. Like, that and the Fire win, like, they're in the 9th spot going to the League's Cup break.
The planets could align, the cards could all be on the table.
100%.
All right. Any other last words of wisdom for this episode for our lovely Jubblies?
Go.
Go.
Yeah.
Go, Chris Brady.
Well, yeah. No, I mean,
Sheriff
like,
Omsberg.
honestly,
Yeah.
I think this could be a fun game one way or another. Like, I think that you're right, DJ, when you're like, there like could be a lot of dark arts there. Like, you know, who knows? Do
we see the team that do we see the Fire that could very easily actually make the playoffs, or do we see, oh yeah, Miami's the best team in the league right now?
Which Fire are we going to see?
and which Miami are we going to see? Because like they have laid a couple goose eggs too. Like,
oh yeah. All right. Well, ladies and germs and they thems of the Fire, thank you as always to listening to the Bonfire. As Tim mentioned earlier, if you're not following us on Twitter or X or whatever Elon Musk calls it now, what are you doing? Go do that. MIR97 as well as MIR97 pods. If you want to read a bit more into the new roster rule changes, Tim also mentioned that he and Alex have made an article explaining to even more of an extent of the rules and what they mean for the Fire at meninred97.com. I, as always, have been Alan the Pole with the goal, joined by my lovely jubbly co-hosts DJ and Tim. I mean, let's end this week with a good one. Come on, you men in red.